Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Eco of Life. Let's start. Eddie was a man who held quiet in his gaze. You've seen the kind, people who enter a space and soften the air around them. He wasn't born that way, at least not from what his history tells us. But by the time you might have crossed paths with him, the light inside had already grown faint, the will to push on slowly seeping away. He moved through life like a specter long before he ever truly vanished. His tale isn't unusual. Perhaps that's what makes it so sorrowful. Because there are countless people like Eddie, individuals who surrender to life softly, long before anyone pays attention. They don't shatter loudly. They wear away, grain by grain, as hope quietly drains. Eddie was raised in a town nestled between hushed back roads and the haze from distant factories. His father logged back-to-back shifts. His mother held things together with weary hands and a thin, stretched smile. There wasn't much warmth in that home, but there wasn't outright harshness either. Just the cool, steady indifference of getting by. That's the first lesson in stories like his. Sometimes it isn't the hurricane that breaks a person, but the unending drizzle, the unchanging gray of daily strain. As a child, Eddie dreamed. He dreamed of being an artist, of filling pads with worlds only he could see. But the drawings held to the fridge by worn magnets were only ever met with a distracted, "That's nice." Affirmation was measured out sparingly in his home, like something scarce. And bit by bit, without anyone noticing, he began to accept what the world implied. That what he loved wasn't useful, that his value lay only in what he could withstand, not in what he might make. By his teen years, those sketch pads were gone, traded for long hours at part-time work. Data tells us that young people who shoulder adult burdens too soon often face more stress, low mood, and exhaustion later on. Eddie embodied that truth. His youth didn't end with a celebration. It ended with a time card punched into a clock. Even so, he kept trying. That's worth noting. People like Eddie don't quit all at once. They let go piece by piece. Small hopes first, then bigger ones until even the largest dreams feel out of reach. Eddie let go of college, then of friendships that asked too much, then of romance. Why chance hurt when feeling nothing was simpler? Each small surrender made the next one easier. In his 20s, Eddie was existing, not living. He woke, worked, returned home, scrolled, slept, day following day, year after year. The stream of content fed him a loop of clips, news, empty amusement. And slowly his mind adapted to this fractured reality where feelings were scattered fragments that never formed a whole. He wasn't an exception. Research over recent decades points to rising levels of anxiety and low spirits, especially among the young, alongside the spread of digital noise and endless stimulation. Eddie wasn't malfunctioning. He was responding the way humans do when drowned in disarray. But when you're inside it, it doesn't feel like a system, it feels like a personal failure. Eddie believed the numbness was his flaw. His joylessness, his lack of drive, his deep fatigue. He saw them as proof of something broken within. And so, in 1,000 tiny choices, he withdrew. He let calls from old friends go unanswered. He stopped cooking real meals. He left dishes to tower like monuments to neglect. Eventually, he avoided mirrors. He couldn't face the eyes looking back. If you'd met him then, you might not have seen it. He still smiled politely at work, nodded in conversations, said, "I'm fine," when asked. Letting go doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like functioning. Sometimes it looks like someone quietly erasing themselves while wearing the mask of okayness. And here is the hard reality. Society often misses people like Eddie until it's too late. We live in a world that prizes output, not being present. As long as he showed up, paid bills, and stayed out of trouble, no one really asked if he was all right. And when they did, they wanted the short answer, not the true one. That's one of modern life's quiet cruelties. We are surrounded by others, yet so many are profoundly alone. But let's pause. Let's step back from Eddie's personal journey and see the wider frame. Because Eddie's life, as aching as it is, isn't just one man's story. It reflects a culture that subtly teaches people to retreat. Consider this. Global health studies show that depression is now a leading cause of disability worldwide, touching hundreds of millions. Anxiety follows close behind. These aren't just numbers. They reflect lives like Eddie's, where hope wilts under pressure, disconnection, and relentless expectation. And yet, so many solutions point inward. Fix yourself, heal yourself, optimize yourself. Take a pill, try an app, read a book, breathe. While such tools can help, they can also reinforce a dangerous idea that the problem is you alone. That sadness is a glitch, not what it often is. A human response to an overwhelming world. Eddie never learned that. He thought he was broken, and believing that, he never asked for help, never spoke the full depth of his despair. He just faded. But what if we saw Eddie another way? Not as someone who failed to cope, but as a mirror reflecting cracks in our systems, our communities, our way of life. Maybe he wasn't weak. Maybe he was unbearably human in a world that asks us to act like machines. This is where the lesson starts to unfold. Letting go of life is rarely about laziness or lack of strength. More often, it's about exhaustion. People carrying more than they can hold until their spirit quietly fractures. So picture Eddie again in his dim apartment, scrolling without end. Imagine him pausing, the screen's glow lighting his tired face. Somewhere deep, a faint whisper tells him this isn't how it should be. But the whisper is soft, buried under the noise of distraction. And Eddie, like so many of us, keeps scrolling. How many Eddies are out there right now? How many are quietly retreating, blaming themselves, when it might really be the outcome of an overloaded, disconnected, output-focused world? That's the tragedy, but it can also be a starting point. Because once you see that Eddie's story isn't a personal failure but a shared one, you can't unsee it. You start to ask different questions. You look for truer answers. Eddie's story doesn't end in that apartment. At least not yet. Because when someone lets go of life, the story isn't about the final fall. It's about the stillness before it. That's where the deepest insights hide. You see, when Eddie lay there night after night, he didn't want to stop existing. He wanted the pain to stop existing. That difference matters. Studies show most people who feel like giving up don't truly wish to end their lives. They want their suffering to end. They want escape from the cycle of weariness, emptiness, and quiet despair. Eddie's pain grew from two things: losing touch with himself and losing touch with others. He'd forgotten the boy with the sketch pad, and no one in his life reminded him. Psychologists call this a loss of coherence, when your story no longer makes sense, when past and present don't connect to a meaningful future. The mind begins to shut down. That's what was happening to Eddie. But here's the turn. Eddie wasn't weak for feeling this. He was deeply human. Some of history's great thinkers have known similar despair. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called despair the sickness unto death, not because it kills the body, but because it stifles the spirit. Yet he also believed it could be a beginning, because it forces a confrontation with truth. Maybe Eddie's silence wasn't just empty space. Maybe it was ground being cleared for something new. Imagine Eddie one morning. He wakes as usual, but something shifts. Maybe it's sunlight through the blinds in a new way. Maybe a memory of an old drawing surfaces. Maybe it's just the fatigue of being fatigued. Whatever it is, he feels a faint tug, a reminder that life wasn't always this gray. Recovery doesn't start with a miracle. It starts with a whisper. For Eddie, that whisper was realizing he didn't want to vanish. He wanted to feel alive again. Here, the learning in his story matters. Psychology shows one of the strongest antidotes to despair is connection. Not necessarily therapy or medicine, though those help, but simple human contact. Being heard, being seen, knowing you're not invisible. So many people say what saved them was a talk, an embrace, even a stranger's kindness. Picture Eddie reaching out, hesitant and awkward, to an old friend. Maybe he just texts, "Want to grab coffee?" That moment, tiny as it seems, is rebellion. It's choosing, however shakily, to step back toward life. Research supports this. Small acts of reaching out can break isolation and start a slow upward turn. But the deeper lesson isn't just about Eddie. It's about us. Because Eddie could be anyone, your neighbor, your colleague, the person beside you on the bus. Sometimes Eddie could be you. That's why his story asks us, How many around us are quietly fading while we're too distracted to notice? Modern culture doesn't make it easy. We're told to be self-sufficient, to handle things alone, to show only strength. But humans weren't built to carry their burdens in solitude. For most of history, survival depended on community. To be isolated then meant death. Today, isolation kills slowly, it eats at the spirit. Yet the way back remains the same. Community, connection, shared humanity. So Eddie's difficult past isn't just a warning. It's a lesson. It shows what happens when meaning, connection, and self-worth are stripped away. But it also shows where the way back can be found. Because even in the deepest quiet, the slightest memory of love, creativity, or bond can begin to pull someone toward light. This is where insight meets inner life. As one thinker put it, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Eddie's trouble wasn't just the weight of his struggles. It was the absence of a why. He'd lost the thread of meaning in his own story. But meaning isn't found by chance. It's built. And that understanding changes everything. Imagine Eddie months later. He's still marked, still weary, but something has moved. He sketches again, not for praise or money, but to remember who he is. He meets that friend more often, even if just to sit quietly over coffee. He takes short walks just to feel the air. These things don't fix all that's hard, but they start weaving coherence back into his days. Here's the truth. Eddie's story remains difficult. There's no magical turnaround. Life doesn't suddenly become easy, but he learned something vital, that letting go wasn't about weakness. It was about disconnection. And reconnection, however delicate, is always possible. If you take one thing from Eddie's life, let it be this: despair is not the end. It is a signal, a sign that something in your life has drifted out of balance. And if you can hear that signal, if you can look beyond self-blame and instead seek connection and meaning, you can begin to step back into living. Right now, as you read this, maybe you recognize some of Eddie's quiet in yourself. Maybe you've felt that same weight, that same pull to fade. If so, let this story remind you, you are not broken. You are not defective. You are human, and being human means you are wired for resilience, for bond, for renewal. Eddie's past was tough, yes, but it wasn't the whole story. Because beneath all that stillness was a truth waiting to be remembered. That life, however fragile, however heavy, is still worth stepping back into. And maybe, just maybe, that reminder is what someone needs to hear today. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe my channel. For more update,